On a rainy dawn, a powerful executive finds a cleaning woman sleeping, exhausted with a baby in her arms. The scene, simple and silent, shatters everything he believed about success and power. He begins to watch her, helping in secret, until her pain becomes impossible to ignore. What emerges between them goes beyond compassion. It is the beginning of a silent revolution within the company, and within him. If this story interests you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. Let's continue. The rain fell hard on Park Avenue that Thursday morning. The drops beat against the windows of the skyscrapers with an almost hypnotic insistence, creating a sound that echoed through the empty corridors of Marks Towers, Inc., one of the largest construction companies in the country. Edward Marks parked his black sedan in the underground garage and turned off the engine, observing the grey walls of the parking lot for a moment. It was 4:30 in the morning, and he shouldn't have been there. He should have been at home, sleeping next to his wife, preparing for another day of meetings and decisions that moved millions of dollars. But he wasn't. He had forgotten the Anderson construction contract in his office, a document he needed to sign before 8 in the morning, when the meeting with the investors would begin. Edward was meticulous, organized, a man who didn't make mistakes like that, but it had happened, and now he had to retrieve that brown envelope he had left on his desk next to the computer. He got out of the car and walked to the elevator, smelling the scent of damp concrete mixed with the aroma of cleaning products. He pressed the button for the 23rd floor and waited. The elevator rose, in silence, only the soft hum of the machine breaking the quiet of the night. When the doors opened, Edward stepped out and walked down the corridor, illuminated by emergency lights, his footsteps echoing against the marble floor. That's when he saw it. At the end of the hall near the conference room, 2 office chairs were pushed together, forming a sort of makeshift bed, and on them, curled up, with a thin blanket partially covering her body, was a woman. In her arms, a baby slept. Edward stopped in the middle of the corridor, feeling a strange tightness in his chest. It wasn't anger nor indignation. It was something else, something he couldn't name. He approached slowly, without making a sound. The woman wore the blue uniform of the cleaning staff, and the ID badge hanging from her blouse pocket read, Monica Woods. Her dark hair was tied in a messy ponytail, and even in sleep her face bore an expression of deep exhaustion. The baby, wrapped in a faded pink blanket, breathed softly, oblivious to the world around. Edward stood there, watching the scene for too long. He didn't know what to do. Part of him wanted to wake them up, ask what was happening, offer help. Another part wanted to simply leave, grab the contract and pretend he hadn't seen anything. After all, he wasn't responsible for the personal lives of his employees. He had a company to run, targets to meet, shareholders to satisfy. But he couldn't move. There was something in that image that broke through all the barriers he had built over the years. Edward Marks was a 42-year-old man who had learned early to separate the professional from the personal. The son of a strict and disciplined businessman, he had grown up hearing that feelings had no place in the world of business, and he had followed that advice to the letter. He had married Beatrice for convenience, a union that benefited both families, and he ran his life with the same efficiency with which he ran the company. No complications, no unnecessary emotional involvement. But that woman sleeping on office chairs, holding a baby to her chest, challenged everything he believed to be true. Edward backed away slowly and went to his office. He picked up the contract, but before leaving, he stopped at the door and looked again down the corridor. The 2 were still asleep. He went down in the silent elevator, returned to his car and drove to his home on the Upper East Side. But during the entire drive he couldn't get that image out of his head. When he got home, Beatrice was still asleep. Edward showered, dressed, and had coffee alone on the balcony, watching the sun rise over the buildings of New York City. The city was beginning to wake up. Traffic was increasing. Life was following its predictable course. But something inside him was different. He couldn't stop thinking about that woman. Who was she? Why was she sleeping in the office? Where did she live? Why did she need to bring her baby to work? At 8 o'clock sharp, Edward entered the conference room at Marks Towers, Inc. The investors were already there, well-dressed, with their leather briefcases and calculated smiles. The meeting proceeded as usual: numbers, projections, charts, expansion strategies. Edward spoke with his usual confidence, presented the contract, answered questions, closed the deal. But his mind was elsewhere. When the meeting ended, he called Celia, his secretary of 15 years. "Celia, I need some information." "Of course, Mr. Marks. What is it?" "We have a cleaning staff employee named Monica Woods. I want to know everything about her. Employment status, address, history." Celia raised her eyebrows, surprised, but asked no questions. "I'll check and bring you the information by the end of the afternoon." Edward nodded and returned to his office. He spent the rest of the day in meetings, on phone calls, analyzing projects. But he couldn't fully concentrate. At 5 in the afternoon, Celia knocked on the door and entered with a folder. "Mr. Marks, I have the information you requested." Edward took the folder and dismissed Celia with a wave of his hand. When he was alone, he opened the document. Monica Woods, 28 years old, originally from Newark, had been working at the company for 3 years. Night shift, from 11 at night to 7 in the morning. Minimum wage. Address, 342 Palm Street, the Bronx. Marital status, single. Dependents, 1 daughter, Sophia, 2 years old. Edward closed the folder and stared out the window. 3 years. She had been working there for 3 years, and he had never seen her. Had never even thought about who cleaned the offices during the night, who emptied the trash cans, who mopped the marble floor he walked on every morning. They were invisible people, numbers on a payroll, but now Monica Woods had a face and a story. That night, Edward went home earlier. Beatrice was in the living room watching a soap opera, a glass of wine in her hand. She didn't even look up when he came in. "You're home early today," she commented, without real interest. "Meeting was cancelled," Edward replied, heading up to the bedroom. He lay on the bed and stared at the ceiling. He thought of Monica Woods sleeping on 2 officey chairs. He thought of her daughter, Sophia, only 2 years old. He thought of his own life, so comfortable, so distant from that woman's reality. And for the first time in many years, Edward Marks felt something he hadn't experienced since his youth: restlessness. The next morning he arrived at the office earlier than usual. Before going up to his floor, he went down to the basement, where the cleaning staff's locker rooms were. He had never been there. The corridor was narrow, the walls painted white, the floor concrete. There were a few rusty metal lockers and a wooden bench. Edward walked to the end of the hall and found a small break room. There was an old refrigerator, a table with broken chairs and a torn sofa. It was there that he understood. Monica didn't sleep on the chairs in the corridor by choice. She slept there because she had nowhere else to go. Because she had to work and had no one to leave her daughter with. Because her salary barely paid the rent and basic bills. Because life was a daily struggle for survival. Edward went back up to his office with a weight in his chest. He sat in his leather chair, looked around at the glass walls, the fine wood furniture, the Persian rug. Everything in there cost more than Monica earned in an entire year, and he had never thought about it. For the next few days, Edward couldn't shake that feeling. He attended meetings, signed contracts, made decisions, but the image of Monica Woods kept coming back. Then, on a Friday afternoon, he did something he had never done before. He asked the security guard to show him the security camera footage from the night shift. The guard, a middle-aged man named Joshua, hesitated. "Mr. Marks, is there a problem?" "No, I just want to check something." Joshua took him to the monitoring room. Edward sat in front of the monitors and started watching the recordings. He saw Monica arriving at the building at 11 at night, with her daughter in her arms. He saw her working through the floors, pushing the cleaning cart, emptying trash cans, mopping the floor. He saw her stopping every now and then to check on her daughter, who was sleeping in a makeshift chairbed. He saw her going into the women's restroom and staying there for several minutes. When she came out, she was wiping her face. Edward turned off the monitors. He didn't need to see any more. That night he went home and couldn't sleep. Beatrice snored softly beside him, indifferent. Edward got up and went to his study. He picked up the phone and called Celia even though it was midnight. "Celia, sorry to call at this hour. I need you to do something for me tomorrow morning." Celia, ever professional, didn't complain. "Of course, Mr. Marks. What do you need?" "I want you to buy some things: diapers, formula, baby bottles, baby clothes, a good blanket. And leave everything in the cleaning staff's locker room. No identification, just leave it there." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Understood, Mr. Marks. I'll do it first thing in the morning." "Thank you, Celia." Edward hung up and went back to bed. But he didn't sleep. He kept thinking about Monica, about Sophia, about everything that was happening inside him. Something was changing. Something he couldn't control. On Saturday morning, Celia did as requested. She bought everything and left it in the locker room, inside discreet bags. No one saw. No one knew who had left it there. On Monday night, Edward returned to the building at 3 in the morning. He went down to the monitoring room and watched the recordings. He saw Monica entering the locker room and finding the bags. He saw her looking around, confused. He saw her opening the bags and discovering the contents. He saw her bring a hand to her mouth, her eyes filling with tears. He saw her sit on the bench and cry silently. Edward felt a tightness in his chest. It wasn't pity. It was something deeper. It was recognition. It was humanity. Over the following weeks, he continued to leave things in the locker room: non-perishable food, hygiene products, clothes, always anonymous, always discreet, and Monica always accepted, though with visible suspicion. Edward understood. For a woman like her, used to living on the margins, any gesture of kindness came with doubt. People didn't help without wanting something in return. But Edward wanted nothing. Or at least, that's what he told himself. One night, after watching the recordings once more, he made a decision. He had to talk to her. He couldn't just keep watching from a distance, leaving anonymous gifts. He needed to look her in the eyes, hear her voice, understand her story. The following Thursday, he went down to the cleaning sector himself. It was midnight, and the building was empty, except for the security guards and the night crew. Edward walked through the silent corridors until he found Monica on the 10th floor, cleaning a conference room. She had her back to him, wiping down the long glass table. She didn't hear him arrive. Edward stood at the door for a few seconds, watching. Monica was thinner than she appeared on camera. The blue uniform was loose on her body, and her dark hair was pulled back in a tight bun. When she finished cleaning the table, she turned and was startled to see him there. "Mr. Marks," she said, her eyes widening. "I'm sorry. I didn't know you were here. Should I leave? Did I do something wrong?" Her voice was soft, but it trembled slightly. Edward saw the fear in her eyes and felt a pang of guilt. Of course she was afraid. He was the owner of the company, the man who could fire her with a snap of his fingers. "No, Monica, you haven't done anything wrong. In fact, I wanted to talk to you." Monica wrung the cleaning cloth between her hands, nervous. "With me? About what?" Edward entered the room and stood a few feet away, trying to seem less intimidating. "About that night I saw you sleeping in the corridor, with your daughter." Monica's face paled. She swallowed hard and looked down. "Mr. Marks, I'm so sorry. I know I shouldn't bring my daughter to work, but I have no one to leave her with. My mother died last year, my father was never around, and I have no family here in New York. The public daycare has no openings, and I can't afford a private one. I need this job, sir. Please don't fire me." The words came out in a desperate rush. Edward felt his chest tighten again. "I didn't come here to fire you, Monica. I came because I want to help." Monica looked up, confused. "Help?" "Yes. I want to understand your situation and see what I can do." Monica was silent for a long moment, studying his face. Then she shook her head slowly. "With all due respect, Mr. Marks, why do you care? You didn't even know I existed until now. Why do you suddenly want to help me?" It was a fair question. Edward didn't have a simple answer. "Because I saw you that night and realized something I had never realized before. I realized that while I was living my comfortable life, people like you were fighting just to survive. And I realized it was happening under my own roof. I can't change the world, Monica, but I can do something for you." Monica kept looking at him, her eyes shining with tears she was trying to hold back. Was It you who left those things in the locker room? Edward nodded. It was me. A tear ran down Monica's face. She wiped it away quickly. Thank you, she whispered. You don't know how much that meant to me. To us. Edward took a step forward. Let me do more, Monica. Let me really help. Monica hesitated, then asked, Why? Why do you want to do this? Edward was silent. He didn't know how to answer. He didn't fully understand what was happening inside him. All he knew was that, for the first time in a long time, he felt like he was doing something that truly mattered. Because it's the right thing to do, he said finally. Monica nodded slowly, wiping away another tear. Okay, if you really want to help, I accept. Edward smiled for the first time in weeks. It wasn't a calculated, professional smile. It was genuine. Great, let's talk more about this. But not here. How about tomorrow, in my office, during the day? You can bring Sophia. I'll ask Celia to set up a comfortable space for her. Monica looked surprised. During the day? But I work at night. Don't worry about that. I'll adjust your schedule. Monica nodded, still in disbelief at what was happening. Okay, Mr. Marks, thank you. Edward turned to leave but stopped at the door. Monica, you can call me Edward. She smiled shyly. Okay, Mr. Edward. That night, when Edward returned home, he felt different, lighter, more alive. Beatrice was asleep, as always. He lay down beside her and, for the first time in a long time, slept soundly. The next day, Monica arrived at the office at 2 in the afternoon with Sophia in her arms. The little girl had dark, curly hair and big, curious eyes. Edward had asked Celia to prepare a corner in his office with toys and pillows. Monica entered shyly, still wearing her blue uniform. Edward indicated a chair, and she sat down, placing Sophia on the floor beside her. The girl immediately began to explore the new toys. Monica, Edward began, I want to know more about you, about your life, your plans, your dreams. Monica seemed taken aback by the question. My dreams? Yes, everyone has dreams. Monica was silent for a moment, then spoke softly. I dream of giving my daughter a better life. I dream of having our own place to live, where she can play without fear. I dream of being able to study, maybe go to college. But those are just dreams, Mr. Edward. Reality is different. Edward listened attentively. Then he asked, Why do you work at night? Because it pays a little more than the day shift, and because at night there are fewer people, so I can bring Sophia without anyone noticing too much. And where do you live? In a boarding house in the Bronx. We share a small room with 2 other people. It's not ideal, but it's what I can afford. Edward felt indignation rise within him, not at Monica, but at the system, at the inequality, at himself for having lived so many years ignoring all of this. Monica, I want to propose something. I'm going to increase your salary and change your shift to the daytime. That way you can work while Sophia is at a daycare that the company will provide, and I'll help you find a better place to live. Monica looked at him in disbelief. You would do that for me? But why? Because you deserve it. Because your daughter deserves it, and because I can do it. Tears returned to Monica's eyes. She wiped them away quickly. I don't know what to say. Thank you doesn't seem like enough. You don't have to say anything, just accept the help. Monica nodded, smiling through her tears. I accept. Edward smiled back. And in that moment, he felt that something inside him had changed forever. He didn't know where it would lead him. He didn't know what the consequences would be, but he knew he had made the right choice. As Monica played with Sophia on the office floor, Edward looked out the window at the city below. New York City continued its frantic pace, millions of people living their lives, fighting their battles, and he, Edward Marks, head of one of the largest companies in the country, had just made the most important decision of his life. Not a business decision, not a corporate strategy, but a human decision. A choice to see another person, to extend a hand, to make a difference. And for the first time in many years, Edward felt that he was truly alive. The following weeks brought changes that Edward Marks had never imagined implementing. Monica started working the day shift from 9 to 5, with a salary 40% higher than before. Sophia was enrolled in a private daycare near the office, a place with caring teachers, colorful toys, and proper meals. Edward also helped Monica find a small but decent apartment in a simple building in Astoria, Queens. 2 bedrooms, an open kitchen, a renovated bathroom, nothing luxurious, but infinitely better than the shared room at the boarding house. Monica cried when she saw the apartment for the first time. She couldn't hold back the tears as she walked through the empty rooms, imagining Sophia running through the living room, imagining herself cooking in her own kitchen, sleeping in her own bed. Edward stood at the door, watching in silence, feeling a satisfaction that no multi-million-dollar contract had ever given him. "It's perfect," she said, wiping her eyes. "Thank you, Edward, from the bottom of my heart." "You deserve this, Monica, and so much more." But the changes in Monica's life did not go unnoticed within the company. Employees began to talk. The cleaning lady who suddenly worked administrative hours, the cleaning staff member who now had a desk on one of the upper floors. The gossip spread through the corridors like wildfire. On the 13th floor, where the directors' offices were located, Gregory Pike, the CFO of Marks Towers, Inc., was growing increasingly annoyed. Gregory was a 53-year-old man with graying hair slicked back, bespoke suits, and a voracious ambition. He had worked at the company for 20 years and had always seen himself as Edward's natural successor when he decided to retire. But lately, Edward had been different, distracted, less focused on the numbers, and now this business with a cleaning lady. Gregory called an informal meeting with 3 other directors: Marcus Taylor, Director of Operations, Renee Campbell, Chief Legal Officer, and George Albright, Director of Human Resources. They met in Gregory's office on a Tuesday afternoon, with the door closed. "We need to talk about Edward," Gregory began, pouring coffee into porcelain cups. "Have you noticed the changes in him?" Marcus, a portly man of 45, nodded immediately. "Of course I've noticed. He's different, less objective. In the last planning meeting, he kept talking about social responsibility and humanizing the company. That's not the Edward we know." Renee, an elegant woman of 40, crossed her legs and picked up her coffee cup. "And there's this situation with the cleaning lady. Monica Woods. He raised her salary, changed her shift, found her an apartment. The employees are talking." George, the oldest of the group at 60, with vast experience in people management, shook his head. "This could set a dangerous precedent. If we start doing favors for one employee, all the others will want the same treatment. The company will descend into chaos." Gregory took a sip of coffee and placed the cup on the table with a precise gesture. "My concern goes beyond that. Edward is losing focus. We have important projects underway, investors expecting returns, competitors cornering us, and he's worried about a cleaning lady. It doesn't make sense." Marcus leaned forward. "Do you think there's something more? I mean, between him and the woman?" Gregory gave a cynical smile. "I don't know. But whatever it is, it's affecting his judgment, and that's bad for all of us." Renee, always pragmatic, intervened. "What do you propose, Gregory?" Gregory was silent for a few seconds, thinking. "I think we need to watch closely. Document everything. If Edward continues down this path, we may have to take action. After all, we have a responsibility to the company and the shareholders." The other 3 exchanged glances. No one dared to confront Edward Marks openly. He was the owner of the company, the founder's son, a powerful and respected man. But Gregory was right. If Edward was losing control, someone had to act. Meanwhile, on the floor above, Edward was working in his office, oblivious to the conspiracies. Celia entered with a stack of documents for him to sign. "Mr. Marks, the contracts for the Philadelphia project need your signature, and the people from Ferreira Construction are waiting for your answer about the partnership." Edward leafed through the documents distractedly. "Leave them here, Celia. I'll review them and sign them tomorrow." Celia hesitated. "But sir, it's urgent. They need the answer today." Edward looked at her, annoyed. "I said I'll sign them tomorrow, Celia." Celia swallowed and nodded. Yes, Mr. Marks. When he was alone, Edward rubbed his face with his hands. He was tired. In recent days, his marriage to Beatrice had worsened even more. She constantly complained about his lack of attention, his late arrivals home, his distance. Edward had tried to explain that he was busy with the company, but the truth was different. His mind was elsewhere. He was thinking about Monica, about Sophia, about how to help them, about how to create real change in the company. He had decided to implement a new project, a support center for single mother employees, a place where they could rest during their break, where there would be toys for the children, where they could receive guidance on labor rights and social benefits. He called this project the Mother's Hub. It would be discreet, without marketing, without fanfare, just a space of genuine care. But when he presented the idea at the weekly directors' meeting, he was met with an awkward silence. Gregory was the first to speak. Edward, with all due respect, I don't see the need for this. We already offer fair wages and adequate benefits. Why create more costs? Edward stared at him firmly. Because it's the right thing to do, Gregory. We have many employees who are single mothers who work here and have no support. We can make a difference in their lives. Marcus cleared his throat. But this could create unrealistic expectations. What if other employees want similar benefits? Edward slammed his hand on the table, making everyone flinch. Then we'll give them. This company makes millions a year. We can invest a fraction of that in caring for the people who work here. Renee tried to soften the tone. Edward, we understand your concern, but we need to think strategically. This could affect our image in the market. Competitors might see it as a weakness. Edward looked at each of them, feeling a mix of frustration and disappointment. When did we become so callous? When did we stop caring about people? No one answered. Gregory finally broke the silence. Edward, we do care, but we also have responsibilities. We can't let feelings get in the way of rational decisions. Edward stood up abruptly. The meeting is over. I'm implementing the Mother's Hub with or without your support. He left the room, leaving the directors in silence. In the corridor, he took a deep breath, trying to control his anger. How had it come to this? How had he become so different from the people he worked with? That afternoon, he went down to the floor where Monica worked. She was organizing documents in a file room. When she saw him, she smiled. Edward, hi, is everything okay? Cup smiled back, feeling the tension ease. Hi, Monica. I just came to see how you are. I'm fine. Better every day, actually. Sophia loves the daycare. She talks about her teacher, Camilla, all the time. That's good, Edward said, leaning against the wall. I'm glad to hear it. Monica studied him for a moment. But you don't seem well. Did something happen? Edward hesitated, then decided to be honest. I had a difficult meeting with the directors. They're not supporting a project I want to implement. What is it? A support center for single mothers who work here. I want to create a place where they can rest, get help, have support. Monica's eyes filled with tears. Really? You would do that? I'm going to do it, Monica. I just need time to convince the others. Monica took a step forward and, on impulse, hugged Edward. He was surprised for a moment, but then he returned the hug. It was a simple, sincere hug, full of gratitude. When they separated, Monica was crying. Thank you, Edward, for everything you're doing. You've changed my life. Edward felt something tighten in his chest, an emotion he couldn't name. You've changed mine too, Monica. They stood there looking at each other. There was something in the air, a connection, a nascent intimacy. Edward felt a warmth rise up his neck. He took a step back. I have to go. I have more meetings. Of course. See you later. Edward left quickly, his heart pounding. What was happening to him? He couldn't be developing feelings for Monica. That would be crazy. He was married. She was his employee. There was a huge difference between their lives, their realities. But he couldn't deny that something was changing, something deep and frightening. That night, he returned, home later than usual. Beatrice was on the balcony, smoking a cigarette. She didn't even look up when he came in. Hi, Edward said, tired. "Hi," she replied coldly. "How was your day?" "Normal. And yours?" "Complicated." Beatrice stubbed out her cigarette in the ashtray and finally looked at him. "Edward, we need to talk." He sat down in a chair, resigned. "About what?" "About us. About this marriage that no longer works." Edward was silent. Part of him knew this conversation would come sooner or later. "What do you mean?" Beatrice sighed. "You know what I mean. We don't love each other. We never really did. This marriage was a convenience for our families, and now it's empty. You live at work, I live in my routine. We are strangers sharing a house." Edward couldn't disagree. She was right. "And what do you propose?" "I think we should consider a separation. Civilized, discreet. No scandals." Edward thought for a long moment. Part of him felt relief at the suggestion. Another part felt guilt. "All right. Let's talk to the lawyers." Beatrice seemed surprised by his agreement. "You're not going to argue?" "No, you're right. It makes no sense for us to continue like this." Beatrice nodded slowly. "All right, I'll arrange everything." That night, Edward slept in the guest room. For the first time in years, he felt light, as if a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. He knew the separation would be complicated, that there would be difficult conversations, paperwork, division of assets, but he also knew it was necessary. They couldn't continue living a lie. In the following days, while Beatrice began the separation proceedings, Edward focused on the mother's hub. He hired an architect to design the space, bought comfortable furniture, educational toys, children's books. He assigned a psychologist and a social worker to be available twice a week. Everything was done discreetly, without fanfare. When the space was ready, Edward called all the mother employees of the company for a meeting. There were 23 women from different sectors. Cleaners, secretaries, administrative assistants, all with similar stories, all fighting alone. Edward explained the project, showed them the space, talked about the available services. The women listened in silence, some with tears in their eyes. When he finished, one of the older cleaning ladies, Mrs. Regina, raised her hand. "Mr. Marks, why are you doing this?" Edward thought about the question. He could give a corporate answer, talk about social responsibility, company image, but he decided to be honest. "Because I saw an injustice and decided to do something about it. Because you deserve support. Because it's the right thing to do." The women applauded. Some cried. Monica, sitting at the back, looked at Edward with an expression he couldn't decipher. Admiration, gratitude, or something more. After the meeting, Monica approached him. "Can I talk to you?" "Of course." They went to his office. When he closed the door, Monica was silent for a moment, as if trying to find the right words. "Edward, I don't know how to thank you for everything you've done, for me, for Sophia, for all the other women. You've changed our lives." Edward felt his face grow warm. "You don't need to thank me, Monica. I did what any decent person would do." "No, you did much more than that. You saw us, you cared, and that's rare." They stood there looking at each other. Edward felt an almost irresistible urge to step forward, to touch her face, to say things he shouldn't say, but he held back. "Monica, he began, but he didn't know how to finish the sentence. She took a step forward and placed her hand on his arm. "I know," she said softly. And somehow, Edward knew she understood what was happening between them, the connection that grew with each encounter, the feelings that neither of them dared to name. They pulled away at the same time, as if they had been burned. Monica took a step back. "I have to go. Sophia must be waiting for me at the daycare." Edward nodded, still flustered. "Of course, see you tomorrow." When she left, Edward sat down, heavily in his chair. What was he doing? He couldn't get involved with Monica. It would be wrong. He was her boss. There was a difference in power, in status, in reality. But he couldn't deny what he felt. For the first time in his adult life, he was feeling something genuine, something real. Meanwhile, on the 13th floor, Gregory Pike watched everything with growing concern. He had spies all over the company. He knew about the mother's hub. He knew about the frequent meetings between Edward and Monica. He knew Edward's marriage was ending. and he knew that all of this represented an opportunity. In a private meeting with Marcus and Renee, Gregory laid out his plan. Edward is losing control. He's making changes without consulting the board, spending company money on questionable projects, maintaining an inappropriate relationship with a subordinate. All of this can be used against him. Marcus looked uncomfortable. Are you suggesting we remove Edward from the presidency? Gregory smiled coldly. I'm suggesting we prepare the ground. If he continues like this, the shareholders will become dissatisfied, and when that happens, someone will need to take control, someone rational, someone focused. Renee crossed her arms. That's risky, Gregory. Edward is well liked by many employees, and he has his family's support. Gregory waved his hand dismissively. For now, but everything can change. We just need to document his mistakes and wait for the right moment. The three agreed to continue observing, and as they made their plans in the shadows, Edward and Monica continued their journey, unaware of the approaching danger. Two worlds colliding, two lives intertwining, and a storm forming on the horizon, ready to destroy everything they had built. 3 months had passed since the creation of the Mother's Hub. The project had grown beyond Edward's expectations. The original 23 employees were now supported by other women in the company who, even if not single mothers themselves, wanted to contribute. A silent network of solidarity had formed. They swapped shifts when one had an emergency, looked after each other's children, shared clothes and toys. What had started as an institutional project had transformed into something much bigger, a community. Mrs. Regina, the older cleaning lady who had asked the first question at the inaugural meeting, had naturally taken on the role of the group's leader. She organized support schedules, mediated conflicts, welcomed new employees. Edward watched it all with admiration. He realized he didn't need to control everything. People, when given the right tools, could create their own solutions. Monica blossomed. The hair that was always tied in a tight bun now fell loosely over her shoulders. The eyes that once carried constant fatigue now sparkled. Sophia was growing healthy and happy at daycare, developing beyond expectations. And Monica, for the first time in her adult life, had dreams that went beyond mere survival. One Thursday afternoon, Edward called her to his office. When she entered, he was standing by the window, looking at the city below. Monica, he began, turning to face her, I have a proposal for you. She sat down, curious. What is it? I want you to take a management course. There's an institution partnered with the company that offers scholarships. It's a 1-year course, twice a week in the evening. You'd have to adjust your schedule, but we can make it work. Monica's eyes widened. A management course? Me? But Edward, I barely finished high school. I don't have the background for that. Edward sat on the edge of his desk facing her. You have something more important than an academic background, Monica. You have intelligence, determination, and the will to grow. I've seen how you organize your work, how you help the other women at the hub. You were born to lead. Monica shook her head, incredulous. I don't know, Edward. I'm afraid I won't be able to do it. You will, and I'll be here to support you. Monica's eyes filled with tears. Why do you do this for me? Why do you care so much? Edward was silent for a long moment. He knew the answer, but he was afraid to say it out loud. Because you deserve every opportunity life can offer, and because, he hesitated, then continued softly, because I care about you. The air in the room seemed to thicken. Monica stared at him, and Edward saw in her eyes the same feeling he was struggling to suppress in himself. She stood up slowly and took a step toward him. Edward, I care about you too, much more than I should. He stood up just inches from her. He could smell the soft perfume she wore, see the small freckles on her nose, hear her quickened breath. He raised his hand and gently touched her face. Monica closed her eyes at his touch. This is crazy, Edward whispered. We can't. Why not? She asked, opening her eyes. Because you're my boss. Because people will talk. Because it's inconvenient. Because I don't want to hurt you, Monica. Because my life is complicated. Because you deserve someone better. Monica placed her hand over his, still on her face. Let me decide what I deserve. Edward pulled his hand back, taking a step away. He took a deep breath, trying to regain control. Not now, Monica, not like this. My separation isn't finalized yet. And you need to focus on your life, your studies, on Sophia. We can't complicate things. Monica looked hurt, but nodded. All right, if that's what you want. It's not what I want, Edward said, his voice hoarse with emotion. But it's what needs to be done. For now. Monica gave a small, sad smile. For now, she repeated. I'll accept the course, Edward. Thank you for the opportunity. She left the office, and Edward sat heavily in his chair, his heart racing. He knew he was falling in love with her. Maybe he had been for some time, but he had to. Be cautious, responsible. He couldn't act on impulse and ruin everything. Meanwhile, on the 13th floor, Gregory Pike was receiving information from one of his sources. Carla, a secretary on the 12th floor, who was unhappy with her salary and sought favors from Gregory, had witnessed the conversation between Edward and Monica through the ajar office door. She told Gregory everything. He smiled as he heard the report. This was exactly what he needed. Edward Marks, the exemplary leader, emotionally involved with a subordinate. The media would love a story like that. The shareholders would be scandalized. It was the perfect ammunition. In a private meeting with his personal lawyer, Gregory laid out his plan. I want you to compile everything we have on Edward. The expenses for the mother's hub, the salary increases without board approval, the apartment he rented for the employee, and now this scholarship. Everything. The lawyer, a thin, shrewd man named Dr. Rivers, nodded. And what do you intend to do with this information? I'm going to present it to the board of shareholders. I'll show that Edward is using company resources to personally benefit an employee with whom he has a romantic involvement. That's mismanagement, maybe even embezzlement. Dr. Rivers looked concerned. Gregory, this could be dangerous. Edward has a lot of power and influence. Gregory waved his hand dismissively. Power he's squandering. The shareholders only care about results, and the company's results have been declining in recent quarters. With Edward distracted by this obsession with social responsibility, we've lost important contracts. It's time for someone more focused to take over. You, I presume. Gregory smiled. Of course. In the following weeks, Gregory worked meticulously to undermine Edward's position. He planted doubts in the minds of the smaller shareholders, commenting on Edward's erratic changes, his questionable spending, his loss of focus. He prepared a detailed dossier documenting everything, and he waited for the right moment to strike. That moment came at a regular board meeting, scheduled for the last Friday of July. Edward arrived confident, suspecting nothing. The meeting began normally with financial reports, discussions of new projects, budget approvals. But then, Gregory asked for the floor. Gentlemen of the board, he began, standing up. I would like to bring to everyone's attention a delicate but urgent matter. It concerns the management of President Edward Marks. Edward frowned, surprised. Gregory, what are you talking about? Gregory opened a folder and began distributing copies of a document. Over the past few months, I have observed with growing concern a series of questionable decisions made by Mr. Marks, decisions that, in my opinion, are not aligned with the best interests of the company. Edward took a copy of the document and began to read. His face paled as he went on. Everything was there, every cent spent on the mother's hub, every salary increase given to Monica, the apartment, the scholarship. And worse, there were photos of Edward and Monica talking in the hallways, photos of them leaving the building together, photos that, out of context, suggested much more than what had actually happened. This is ridiculous, Edward said, throwing the document on the table. These are distortions of the truth. Gregory continued relentlessly. They are facts, Edward. You have spent significant company resources on projects not approved by the board. You have given preferential treatment to a specific employee. And worse, you maintain an inappropriate personal relationship with this employee. This is not just mismanagement, it's unethical. Edward stood up, furious. I created a support project for vulnerable employees. I gave a hard-working woman the opportunity to grow. And yes, I care about her as a human being. Where is the crime in that? One of the older shareholders, Mr. Taylor, raised his hand. Edward, with all due respect, Gregory has a point. You cannot use company resources to benefit a specific person, regardless of your motivations. It sets a dangerous precedent. Another shareholder, Mrs. Helen, added, and these photos suggest a personal relationship. If that's true, it's a clear violation of the company's code of conduct. Relationships between superiors and subordinates are strictly prohibited. Edward looked around the table. He saw closed faces, suspicion, judgment. He realized he was losing. Gregory had planned everything perfectly. I would ask the board to consider the temporary suspension of Mr. Marks while we investigate these allegations, Gregory said, taking control of the meeting. For the good of the company and its reputation. There was a murmur among the shareholders. Edward felt the ground give way beneath his feet. Everything he had built, everything he had worked to achieve, was crumbling. This is a coup, he said, his voice trembling with anger. You're using half-truths and innuendos to get me out of the way, Gregory. Gregory smiled. Coldly. I'm protecting the company from a leader who has lost focus. Nothing more. The vote was quick. 8 in favor of suspension, 3 against, 2 abstentions. Edward Marks was suspended from his duties indefinitely, while an internal audit would investigate the accusations. Gregory Pike would temporarily assume the presidency. Edward left that meeting room in shock. In the corridor, he found Celia, who was waiting for him with tears in her eyes. Mr. Marks, I heard. I'm so sorry. Edward nodded, stunned. Celia, I need you to find Monica. Tell her I need to speak with her. In private. At my house. Yes, sir. Edward left the building under the curious gazes of the employees. The news had already spread. The powerful leader had fallen. The whispers began immediately. That afternoon, Monica arrived at Edward's house on the Upper East Side. It was a huge, elegant mansion with manicured gardens and a pool in the back. She had never been there. A butler greeted her and led her to the study, where Edward was waiting, sitting in a leather armchair with a glass of whiskey in his hand. Edward, she said, rushing in, Celia told me what happened. This is my fault. If you hadn't helped me... Edward raised his hand, interrupting her. It's not your fault, Monica. It's mine. I knew I was challenging the system. I knew there would be consequences. I just didn't expect them to come so quickly. Monica sat in the chair opposite him, her eyes filled with tears. What's going to happen now? Edward took a sip of whiskey and sighed. They're going to do an audit. They'll review everything. If they find irregularities, I could lose the presidency permanently, and you... He hesitated. You could be fired too. Monica paled. Fired? But why, I didn't do anything wrong. They'll argue that you received preferential treatment, that you used your relationship with me to gain advantages. Tears streamed down Monica's face. But it wasn't like that. You just helped me because it was the right thing to do. I know that, you know that. But they will twist the truth to fit their narrative. Monica stood up and began to pace the room, desperate. So, I'm going to lose everything? The apartment? The salary? The course? And Sophia? How will I take care of her? Edward stood up and went to her, holding her shoulders firmly. You're not going to lose anything, I guarantee it. The apartment is in my name, not the company's. I'll pay for your course personally. And if they fire you, I'll hire you as my personal assistant. I will take care of you, Monica, no matter what happens. Monica looked at him through her tears. Why are you doing this? Why are you risking everything for me? Edward held her face between his hands, looking deep into her eyes. Because I love you, Monica. I fell in love with you that first night I saw you sleeping in the corridor with Sophia in your arms. And maybe it's crazy, maybe it's wrong, but it's the truth. I love you. Monica sobbed and threw herself into his arms. Edward held her tightly, feeling her body tremble against his. They stayed like that for long minutes, holding each other, finding comfort in each other's presence. When they finally separated, Monica wiped her tears and said, I love you too, Edward. I think I always have. Ever since you showed up that night and treated me like a human being, not an invisible object, you gave me dignity, you gave me hope. How could I not love you?" Edward kissed her. Gently at first, then with more intensity. It was a kiss full of pent-up emotion, of repressed feelings, of unspoken promises. When they broke apart, they were both breathless. "What are we going to do now?" Monica asked. Edward took her hand. "We're going to fight. I'll hire the best lawyers. I'll prove there were no irregularities. I'll get my position back. And you," he smiled, "you will continue to grow, to study, to become the incredible woman you've always been." "And us?" she asked shyly. "What are we?" Edward pulled her closer. "We are two people who found each other in the most unlikely circumstances, who faced judgment and prejudice, and who decided against all odds to fight for what they feel. That's what we are." Monica smiled through her tears. "I like that definition." In the following weeks, the storm intensified. The media discovered the story and distorted it even further. The tabloids called it a corporate scandal, a forbidden romance, an abuse of power. Edward hired a team of top-tier lawyers who began to dismantle Gregory's accusations point by point. All expenses for the Mother's Hub were justified as an investment in human resources, something that was within the president's purview. Monica's apartment was proven to be Edward's personal expense, not the company's. And the photos? Simple professional conversations between a boss and an employee. But the damage was done. Edward's reputation was tarnished, and Monica suffered too. Employees whispered when she passed. Some of the women from the Mother's Hub distanced themselves, afraid of being associated with the scandal. Only Mrs. Regina and a small group remained loyal. One afternoon, Mrs. Regina called Monica for a private chat at the Mother's Hub. "My dear," she began, with the wisdom of her 60 years, "I know this is hard for you, but I want you to know one thing. What Mr. Edward did for us was real. He changed our lives. And if he loves you, and you love him, then that's a beautiful thing. Don't let petty people destroy it." Monica hugged Mrs. Regina, crying, "Thank you, I needed to hear that." "And there's more," Mrs. Regina continued. "We, the women here, are preparing a petition. We're going to ask the board to reconsider Mr. Edward's suspension. We're going to show how he changed our lives, for the better, how he created a more humane environment here." Monica's eyes widened. "You would do that?" "Of course we would. He fought for us. Now it's our turn to fight for him." And so, a small revolution began to brew on the lower floors of Marks Towers, Inc. The employees of the Mother's Hub, along with other women from the company, began to organize. They created a petition calling for Edward's reinstatement. They collected testimonies about how the Mother's Hub had changed their lives. They prepared to present everything to the board at the next meeting. Meanwhile, Edward and Monica faced their private battle. Edward took Monica to dinner at discreet restaurants. They walked through parks where they wouldn't be recognized. They spent nights talking about their dreams and fears. Sophia adored Edward, calling him Uncle Eddie. The three of them formed an unlikely but genuine family. One rainy August night, while they were at Edward's house, Monica finally asked what had been bothering her for weeks. "Edward, what if you can't get your position back? What if we lose everything?" Edward held her hand. "Then we'll start over. Together, because I've learned something in these last few months, Monica. I've learned that success isn't measured in money or power. It's measured in human connections, in love, in making a difference in people's lives. And with you by my side, I'm already the richest man in the world." Monica smiled and kissed him softly. "When you talk like that, I can almost believe everything will be okay." "It will be okay," Edward promised. "Because we have something that Gregory and the others will never have. Truth. And the truth always prevails. In the end." But as they held each other on that rainy night, neither of them knew that the greatest trial was yet to come, that forces beyond their control were in motion, and that the battle for justice and love was just beginning. The audit lasted 2 whole months. 2 months of interrogations, document analysis, account reviews. Edward cooperated with everything, providing every receipt, every justification, every proof. His lawyers worked tirelessly, dismantling each of Gregory's accusations piece by piece, and slowly the truth began to emerge. There was no embezzlement. There was no misuse of company funds. All expenses for the Mother's Hub were within the approved budget for human resources improvements. Monica's apartment had been paid for out of Edward's personal pocket, not with company money. The scholarship came from an existing program, open to any employee who applied. Technically, Edward had done nothing wrong, but Gregory wouldn't give up easily. One September morning, he leaked an edited recording of a conversation between Edward and Monica to the press. The recording suggested intimacy, phrases taken out of context that seemed to confirm an inappropriate relationship. The tabloids exploded with the news. Suspended CEO in romance with subordinate, the headlines screamed. Edward was in his home office when he saw the news. Monica was by, his side pale with terror. Sophia was playing on the floor, oblivious to the storm around them. "How did they get this recording?" Monica asked, trembling. "Someone bugged my office," Edward replied, his jaw tight with anger. "This is illegal. I'm going to sue them." But the damage was already done. The recording spread across social media. The comments were cruel. They said Monica was an opportunist, that she had used her body to climb the ladder. They said Edward was pathetic, a rich man in love with a simple cleaning lady. The judgments were swift and merciless. Monica collapsed, in tears. "I can't take it anymore, Edward. I can't stand people looking at me like I'm... She couldn't finish the sentence. Edward pulled her into his arms, stroking her hair. "I know, my love, I know, but we're not giving up. Not now." "Maybe we should," Monica said, her voice muffled against his chest. "Maybe if I get out of your life, everything will go back to normal for you." Edward pulled away and held her face firmly. "Don't say that. Never say that again. You and Sophia are my life now. Without you, none of this has any meaning. Do you understand?" Monica nodded, crying. "I understand, but it's so hard." "I know, but we'll get through this. Together." That same afternoon, Edward's lawyers filed a lawsuit for illegally obtained evidence and defamation against those responsible for the recording. They traced the source of the leak to Carla, the secretary who had been spying for Gregory. Confronted with the evidence, Carla confessed everything. Gregory had convinced her to install a listening device in Edward's office. It was a crime, and Gregory was involved up to his neck. When the news of the illegal wiretapping came to light, the tide began to turn. Public opinion, which had previously judged Edward and Monica, now turned against Gregory. How could someone so unethical take over the presidency of a respectable company? The shareholders began to question. The press investigated more deeply, and then Mrs. Regina and the women of the Mother's Hub made their move. On a sunny October morning, 27 employees marched to the shareholders' boardroom where an extraordinary meeting was taking place. They carried a petition with 230 signatures from employees at all levels of the company. Mrs. Regina, with her natural dignity, asked for the floor. Gregory, who was temporarily chairing the meeting, tried to stop her. "This is a closed meeting. Employees are not allowed here." But Mr. Taylor, the oldest shareholder, raised his hand. "Wait, Gregory. Let her speak. I want to hear what she has to say." Mrs. Regina entered with the other women behind her. She placed the petition on the table and began to speak with a firm voice. "Gentlemen of the board, my name is Regina Sanders. I have worked at this company for 15 years as a member of the cleaning staff, and I have come here today to represent not only the women of the Mother's Hub, but all the employees who signed this petition. We want to talk about Mr. Edward Marks." Gregory snorted. "This is ridiculous. We're not going to waste time with—" Mr. Taylor interrupted him again. "Silence, Gregory. Continue, Mrs. Sanders." Mrs. Regina took a deep breath and continued. "For years I worked in this company like a shadow, invisible. No one saw me, no one cared. I cleaned the offices at night, emptied the trash cans, mopped the floors. And the next day you would arrive and walk on, That clean floor without ever thinking about who had cleaned it. We were ghosts, until Mr. Edward saw us. She paused, her eyes shining with emotion. He didn't just see us, he cared. He created a space where we could rest, where we received support. For the first time we felt human. For the first time we had dignity. And it wasn't for marketing or for media attention. It was because he genuinely cared. One of the other employees, a young woman named Leanne, stepped forward. I was a single mother living in a shelter with my 1-year-old son. I worked 2 shifts to pay the bills. I was about to give up, but the Mother's Hub saved me. It gave me emotional support, helped me find housing, gave me hope. Today I have an apartment, my son is healthy, and I'm studying to be a nursing assistant. That's thanks to Mr. Edward. Other women began to share their stories, one after another. Single mothers who found dignity, women who found hope, lives that were transformed. Mrs. Helen, the shareholder who had voted for Edward's suspension, had tears in her eyes. When they had all finished, Mrs. Regina concluded, "Gentlemen of the board, I don't know what happened between Mr. Edward and Mrs. Woods. If they love each other, that's their business, not ours. What I do know is that he is a leader who sees people, not just numbers. A leader who uses his power to lift others up, not to oppress them. And a leader like that is rare. I ask you to reconsider your decision, not for him, but for us, for the hundreds of employees who depend on his humane leadership." There was a long silence in the room. Gregory tried to downplay it. Touching stories, but that doesn't change the facts. Edward violated the code of conduct by getting involved with a subordinate. Mr. Taylor turned to him, his gaze hard. "And you violated the law by installing illegal listening devices. What's worse, Gregory?" Gregory paled. "That hasn't been proven." "Yes, it has," said Mrs. Helen, pulling a document from her purse. "Edward's lawyers provided the board with all the evidence this morning. Carla confessed, and the recordings trace back to you." Gregory stood up abruptly. "This is absurd. You're going to believe her over me." Mr. Taylor slammed his hand on the table. "Sit down, Gregory. The audit has concluded that Edward committed no irregularities, and now we discover that you orchestrated a smear campaign using illegal methods. You're fired, and we will be pressing criminal charges." Gregory looked around the table, seeing only closed faces. He realized he had lost. He grabbed his briefcase and stormed out of the room, slamming the door. When he was gone, Mr. Taylor turned to Mrs. Regina and the other women. "Thank you for coming here today. You reminded us of what truly matters. We will now vote on the immediate reinstatement of Edward Marks as president." The vote was unanimous. Edward was back. When Celia called to give him the news, Edward was in the kitchen making pancakes with Sophia. Monica was sitting at the table, drinking coffee. When he answered the phone and heard Celia's words, his knees almost gave out. "Are you serious?" he asked, his voice trembling. "Completely, Mr. Marks. You've been reinstated, and Gregory has been fired and will be prosecuted. It's official." Edward hung up and stood in the middle of the kitchen, stunned. Monica stood up, worried. "What is it? What happened?" He looked at her, his eyes shining. "We won, Monica. We won." Monica screamed with joy and threw herself into his arms. Sophia, not understanding but feeling the happiness, started jumping and screaming too. The 3 of them hugged, laughing and crying at the same time. The following Monday, Edward returned to Marks Towers, Inc. When he entered the building, he was greeted with applause. Employees from all levels had gathered in the lobby to watch him pass. Mrs. Regina was at the front, smiling with pride. Edward stopped and hugged her. "Thank you," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "Thank you for fighting for me." "You fought for us first," she replied. "We were just returning the favor." Edward went up to his office and found everything as he had left it. Celia was waiting for him with a stack of documents, but he dismissed her with a smile. "Later, Celia. Right now, I have something important to do." He went down to the 12th floor where Monica worked. When he entered the room, she was organizing papers. Upon seeing him, her face lit up. "Edward, you're back." "I'm back," he said, walking toward her. "And I've come to do something I should have done a long time ago." He knelt before her. Monica's eyes widened and she brought her hands to her mouth. "Edward, what are you doing?" He took a small box from his pocket and opened it, revealing a simple but elegant ring. "Monica Woods, you came into my life when I was lost. You taught me to see beyond numbers and reports. You taught me that true success is measured in love, in compassion, in making a difference. You and Sophia gave me a family I never knew I needed. And now I can't imagine my life without you. Will you marry me?" Monica was crying, the tears streaming freely. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, yes, yes." Edward placed the ring on her finger and stood up, pulling her into a kiss. The employees watching from the doorway began to applaud and cheer. Monica laughed through her tears. "You just proposed to me in front of all the employees." Edward smiled. "I want everyone to know. I'm not ashamed to love you, Monica. I never was." In the following months, real changes took place at Marks Towers, Inc. Edward implemented a comprehensive program to humanize the company. Salaries were reviewed and increased. Working conditions were improved, benefits were expanded, and the Mothers Hub became a model for other companies. Monica continued her studies and graduated with honors in management. She was promoted to Human Resources Coordinator, not because she was engaged to Edward, but because of her real competence recognized by all. Sophia grew up healthy and happy, calling Edward Dad without hesitation. The wedding took place on a sunny Saturday in April, a simple but beautiful ceremony in the garden of Edward's house. Mrs. Regina was Monica's maid of honor. Celia cried throughout the entire ceremony. The women from the Mothers Hub decorated everything with flowers they had grown themselves. When Edward and Monica exchanged vows, there was no ostentation or exaggerated luxury. There was only genuine love. He promised to honor her every day, to always see her, to fight by her side. She promised to love him in prosperity and in adversity, to be his partner and his equal. And when they kissed as husband and wife, everyone applauded, knowing they were witnessing something rare and precious, a love that had overcome all barriers. 2 years passed. On a lazy Sunday in December, Edward woke up to the smell of coffee coming from the kitchen. He got up and went downstairs to find Monica making pancakes, while Sophia, now 4 years old, was drawing at the table. "Good morning, family," he said, kissing Monica and then Sophia. "Good morning, Daddy," Sophia shouted, showing him her drawing. "Look, I drew our house." Edward looked at the drawing, a house with 3 people holding hands. He smiled and kissed the top of her head. "It's beautiful, Princess." Monica came closer, leaning against him. "Happy?" "More than I ever imagined possible," he replied, hugging her. He looked out the window at the sunny garden. Sophia was playing with her new doll. Monica was humming as she cooked. The house smelled of coffee and happiness. It was a simple life, but it was his. And it was perfect. Edward thought about the entire journey he had taken. From that rainy dawn when he saw Monica sleeping on office chairs to this moment of domestic peace. He thought about how his life had changed, how he had changed, from a cold man focused only on profits to someone who understood that true wealth lay in human relationships. "Monica," he said softly. She turned to face him. "Yes?" "Thank you for saving me." She smiled, touching his face. "You saved me first." "No," he said, holding her hand. "We saved each other." And it was true, because love wasn't about one saving the other. It was about 2 imperfect people finding beauty in each other's imperfections. It was about building together, growing together, overcoming together. That afternoon, they went to Central Park. Sophia ran ahead, laughing, chasing pigeons. Edward and Monica walked hand in hand, watching her. "Sometimes I still can't believe this is real," Monica said. "That I'm here, with you, living this life." "Me?" "Neither," Edward admitted, "but it is real and it's ours." They sat on a bench while Sophia played on the playground. Edward put his arm around Monica's shoulders and she rested her head on his shoulder. They sat there in comfortable silence, watching the people around them. Families laughing, children playing, couples in love. Life happening in all its chaotic beauty. "Edward," Monica said after a while. Do you have any regrets? About everything that happened? About everything you lost? Edward thought about the question. He thought about the position he had almost permanently lost, the reputation that had been tarnished, the difficulties they had faced, and he thought about everything he had gained: Monica, Sophia, a life with purpose, true love. None, he said finally. Not a single one. Monica smiled and kissed him softly. Me neither. As the sun began to set, they returned home. Sophia slept on the way, curled up in the back seat of the car. Edward carried her inside while Monica prepared dinner. He put the little girl to bed, tucked her in, and kissed her forehead. She mumbled something unintelligible and went back to sleep soundly. In the kitchen, he helped Monica finish dinner. They talked about their day, about plans for the coming week, about the small everyday things that made up the fabric of their lives. After dinner, they washed the dishes together, a simple but intimate routine they both cherished. Later, lying in bed, Monica reading a book and Edward reviewing some work documents, she suddenly spoke. You know what I realized today? What? That happiness isn't in the big things, it's in the small moments, like making pancakes on a Sunday morning, like watching Sophia play in the park, like washing dishes together after dinner. It's those moments that make life worthwhile. Edward put his documents aside and pulled her close. You're absolutely right, and I would have missed all those moments if I hadn't found you that night. Monica snuggled against him. I think we found each other exactly when we needed to. Edward kissed the top of her head. I think so too. They were silent for a few minutes, just enjoying each other's presence. Then Edward spoke. Monica, can I ask you a question? Of course. When you first saw me that night, when you woke up and found me standing in the corridor, what did you think? Monica was silent for a moment, remembering. I thought I was going to be fired, that you were there to scold me for breaking the rules. I was terrified. And now, what do you think when you see me? She smiled. I think I'm the luckiest woman in the world, that I have a husband who loves me, who respects me, who sees me as an equal, a man who changed not only my life, but the lives of so many other women, a man who chose love over power, humanity over profit. How could I not love you? Edward felt his eyes sting with unshed tears. I'm the lucky one, Monica. You taught me how to be human again. You taught me that life has meaning beyond business. You gave me a family, a purpose, a reason to wake up happy every morning. They kissed, a long, tender kiss. When they separated, Monica yawned. I'm tired. It was a long day. Sleep, my love. I'll turn off the light. Monica closed her eyes, still nestled against him. In a few minutes, she was fast asleep. Edward stayed awake a little longer, just watching her. Her dark hair spread across the pillow, her soft, regular breathing, her face relaxed and at peace. He thought of the entire path they had traveled, the battles they had fought, the prejudices they had broken, the love they had built day by day, choice by choice, and he felt a deep gratitude for that rainy dawn that had changed everything, for having decided to go back to the office that night, for having stopped in the corridor instead of just moving on, for having chosen to see instead of to ignore. Because sometimes life changes in a single moment, in a single decision, and everything that comes after is a consequence of that initial choice to open your eyes and see what had always been there, waiting to be noticed. Edward turned off the light and closed his eyes, Monica sleeping safely in his arms. Tomorrow would be another day. There would be work, responsibilities, challenges, but there would also be moments of joy. Sophia's laughter, Monica's smiles, the feeling of being exactly where he was supposed to be. And when sleep finally took him, Edward Marks slept soundly, knowing that he had found something no amount of money or power could buy: a true home, built on the strongest foundation there is, genuine love, mutual respect, and the daily choice to be present in each other's lives. The story of Edward and Monica was a story of transformation, of a man who learned to see beyond numbers, and a woman who discovered she deserved dignity. It was a story about breaking social barriers, challenging prejudices, and choosing love above all else. But above all, it was a story about humanity, about seeing one another, about caring, about making a difference, and in every small gesture of care, in every decision, to choose compassion over indifference. They proved that true success is not measured in profits or positions, but in the hearts we touch and the lives we transform along the way. End of the rainy dawn that started it all. End of the struggles and battles. Beginning of a life built on true love and mutual respect. A life that was worth every sacrifice, every tear, every moment of doubt. Because in the end, what mattered was not what they possessed, but who they were when they were together, and together they were complete. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Edward and Monica has deeply touched your heart. If you were moved by this journey of love, overcoming and transformation, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments which moment marked you the most. Was it the first encounter on that rainy dawn, the fight against prejudice, or the final victory of true love? Every day, we bring intense stories like this one, revealing the deepest and most beautiful side of the human soul, showing that love can conquer all barriers when we choose to see others with compassion. Your stories, your comments, and your support inspire us to continue sharing these narratives that warm the heart. We look forward to seeing you in the next episode with another story that will make you believe in the transformative power of love and humanity.